Hi, um, my name is Neela. I am a late diagnosed autistic person with lower support needs. I am also a mother of a child with autism as well, and they have higher support needs. They were diagnosed with autism level 3, but as they have progressed, I believe they are possibly moving into level 2, although I'm not an expert, so I can't say for sure. But that's just kind of my assessment. So I make these videos really just kind of as a video diary about my life when I'm able to, because I'm not always able to. Usually I'm with my daughter, and so I don't have time. My energy is limited, and I just have, when I do have some free time, there's a lot of other things that I need to get done as a single mom, such as catching up on laundry, cleaning the house, doing a lot of reorganizing, trying to get rid of stuff. So I guess today, there's a couple video topics I want to talk about, but I struggle to find the time to actually make those videos. Like as of recent, I'm sure you've seen, this is like my new little temporary, sorry, I'm gonna move it, wannabe filming location. Um, there's been a lot of news. I'm an American citizen, or a citizen of the United States, and we have a very, in my opinion, problematic administration. And one of those people is RFK Jr., and they are in charge of the health of the US citizens. And it's become a recent, if you haven't already heard, focus of the administration to investigate the cause of um, autism in an effort to find a cure. And this is someone, RFK Jr., who was previously a heroin addict, which is not to necessarily shame someone with drug problems, but his point of view has been, at least in the past, that vaccines cause autism. So just given his own personal background, I find it a bit incredibly misguided, ignorant, hypocritical, dangerous rhetoric that he has put out there publicly. And of course, a lot of people in the autistic community are concerned. People with autism, parents of children with autism. I have found, I believe their name is Taylor, from Mom on the Spectrum, to be very informative and helpful during this time, because she's really using her channel to kind of aggregate a lot of the data and has created information on her website. So that's something that I've been meaning to check out, because just in all of the daily chaos, I don't have as much time to fixate on this kind of what feels like a potential impending disaster. But I really just want to give a shout out to her channel and encourage you, if you don't already know it, to check it out, because there's a lot of really great information that she spent time aggregating to help the autistic community in the United States, and I would say at large, because this is an attitude that is not just unique to the US. It's just that we happen to have a politician in office that's making it their cause to figure out the cause of autism. And I will say, as somebody who is a mother of an autistic child, and has had that child since birth, has watched her grow since birth, that while I know some people say that with autism there tends to be a period of regression during childhood development, that's not always the case. So I would just like to state that in my experience of my child, there was never a point of regression. It never correlated with anything to do with vaccines. My daughter was always autistic from the moment she was born, and I knew that innately, and not in the sense that I necessarily knew she was autistic, but I knew she was different. And I think the reason I knew that is because something about her was very much resonant in me, because at the time I didn't know that I was autistic. I found out after having her formally assessed. and then pursuing my own assessment because I'd been previously misdiagnosed as bipolar for most of my life and given medication that always failed to address the symptoms, and then constantly thinking like I was this broken robot because I couldn't manage to be like everybody else no matter how hard I tried. And um so I just think it's important to say, because a lot of people like to promote that this false correlation between vaccines and autism, that at least in my personal experience that was never the case for me and my daughter. She had her routine vaccines and there was never a point of regression. She was just always autistic and did not show any signs of regression after a vaccine. It was just if anything a constant forward trajectory on the autism spectrum. So that's my experience that I think is important to speak about, because while there are some parents that have had that experience of regression, I think it's also important to speak out for those of us that have not had that. So, I can at least counter that I do not think it was vaccine linked personally. Additionally, now that I know that I am autistic, I've been engaging in therapy with a licensed therapist that is trained in neurodivergence. She is ADHD herself, has a grandchild with autism, and so she is very much well versed in neurodivergence, in autism spectrum disorder. And I think through the therapy and the discussions that she's been able to help facilitate between me and my parents and help us improve our communication. Um, I know that my mom, who was the one that primarily raised me, like I'm raising my daughter, also believes that for me, it was never a period of regression after any vaccines. I was, again, in her mind, because we didn't know that I was autistic as a child. I didn't find out until I was 39, and I'm 40 now. I was just always a different child. I was for lack of a better word, and it's not to, um, you know, put blame on me as a child, but I was, by comparison to the first three children she had, a difficult child, an atypical child. And we really worked through therapy and understanding how that has affected our relationship as mother and daughter, because in some ways from the get-go, very subconsciously, I challenged my mother in her sense of feeling, I think, capable and confident in her motherhood, because by the time I came around, I was the fourth child. She was well versed in childcare. She loved children. And then I came along very unexpectedly because my dad had been previously married and did not have any children from that marriage, despite trying. And then my parents were together for about 2 or 3 years before I was born, and I was their first of two children. So it was very much a surprise that I was born, and my brother after that. And then my mom was like, okay, I'm done, 5 kids is enough. And my brother, we also believe, is on the spectrum, but he is an adult and is kind of on his own path in life, so there is no official diagnosis. He does have other health diagnoses, but I think he also deals with autism and possibly a more male phenotypic autism, if you can say that, just in terms of not trying to genderize but trying to label the features of autism. Because one thing that's really difficult is that female autistics, or those who present with what is I've seen labeled by like the psychologist Kim Sage as like the female phenotype of autism, are typically misdiagnosed and overlooked, because in early autism studies, as I'm sure you know, they only studied white males, white boys. And so it was more of the, I would say, more profound presentation of autism, what would now be called autism level 3. In the past, it would have maybe had a different label, because they used to differentiate between Asperger's and, I don't know if it's Asperger's or Asperger's, so I'm sorry, I'm not trying to say it wrong. I always just forget. And autism. So I probably would have been diagnosed, if I had been diagnosed as a child, with Asperger's, or Asperger's. But My brother, on the other hand, I think probably would have been diagnosed with autism. But again, those were not things that were being discussed in the mid 80s, early 90s, unless you were not only, I think, presenting quite profoundly, but also seeking medical help from doctors that were even well versed in the autism spectrum, and not many were. We lived in the Midwest. Um, we spent some time in Iceland as a child. I was born on the West Coast, but it was never anything, throughout the years of me struggling, mostly socially, to connect with people and having a lot of difficulties in emotional regulation. It was never presented as a child that I had any kind of problems necessarily, for lack of a better word, anything to be diagnosed. It was just more a personality. I was just difficult. I was just bratty. I was just disrespectful. When now, in having the diagnosis and having a proper team and medication regimen that helps alleviate a lot of my mostly anxiety symptoms, like overwhelming anxiety symptoms, which the bipolar never medication never treated, that I've really been able to view myself in a much healthier light, and not so much as a broken robot, not as like this mean, bad, selfish, spoiled, disrespectful, problematic child, but as a child that had um, possibly low support needs on the autism spectrum that were not being addressed. And my communication was blunt and direct. And I had problems understanding not so much empathy, because I could understand empathy in many ways. I especially, it's actually been almost like a detriment to me in this life how much I can empathize with others. But especially as a child, I did struggle with understanding the needs of others and empathizing with them over kind of hyper focusing on my own needs and trying to keep myself regulated. That was more important, and made it a lot harder for me to understand that, my friends also deserve to make a choice and I can't control them, which again, the controlling was not because I was malicious or evil, but because I was trying to feel safe in an environment, and controlling it as much as possible was how I would do that. And it was not always received well, obviously, by my peers. So I think it was just a very abstract concept for me as a child, but I was hyperverbal. So I didn't present as somebody with necessarily some kind of obvious disability, when it's, usually more marked by an intellectual disability. An emotional kind of disability is not something that people, I think, see as much. They see it more as a temperament, behavior problem, like you're not being raised well, or someone's not spanking you enough. And I'm not condoning spanking. I'm just kind of referring more to the era that I came from, and that was more the mindset, I would say, of 80s parents, even my own. Although they didn't spank me, it was usually just a lot of threatening of spanking, which in its own right is still traumatic. So yeah, I mean, I guess, I just wanted to do a bit of a life update, but also talk about what's happening with RFK, and just how against it all I am, how disgusted I am by this administration's focus on trying to essentially find the cause or the cure to eradicate autism, when I don't think it is something that needs to be eradicated. I don't mind necessarily learning more about what causes it, but in an effort to cure it, to me, I think is not the right outlook. Sorry, my dogs are outside and I think they're messing around with the screen door. It's closed, but they're probably hearing me talking and they're like, I want to come in. I can hear one of them crying. Go play outside. It's a nice day. Go be dogs. Okay. So what was I saying? About Oh yeah, I think where I'm frustrated is I would much rather see, and I don't think this administration unfortunately is capable of doing this, but rather than trying to cure autism, because I don't feel autistic people need to be cured, I would rather see more investment into resources provided to both autistic people on with different levels of support needs, as well as to supporting the family system and the community of people that help those who have autism, because it is a struggle to varying degrees and different ways. And I think that to me is a much more beneficial approach to helping the autistic community, instead of just kind of speaking for them as a, Trump appointed uh whatever health director. I forget what his actual thing is. Director of the Department of Health, Human Health. I don't know. Those kind of things slip my mind, but I know that he's in that. He's running that thing about our health. So I think it's really misguided, and obviously it's got a lot of us scared of in light of what's going on. There are things reminiscent of historical events that happened during World War I that people do not want to see repeated ever, but also especially here on American soil, because we have for a long time stood for democracy, even as imperfect as it can be. That just to see this potential of these things happening is very unsettling, deeply unsettling. And also knowing that our position as one of the more powerful nations in the world, if we still even are, I don't know, but that what we do very much affects the rest of the world. And so it's concerning when we take on these kinds of stances publicly, that then, other countries that maybe look up to us or ally with us are also going to start to push those harmful narratives. So that's not cool. So yeah, again, I would recommend going to Mom on the Spectrum, and giving her the support and attention that she deserves for putting together a lot of helpful resources. I think a pretty exhaustive list, and that's not easy for an autistic person, especially also an autistic mother. I know that she is. So I just, with my channel, there's not really, I think, as much educational learning as there is just me sharing my personal experience, and maybe from there can be education in that, in finding like resonance of like, hey, I'm like that too, and I didn't know I was autistic or something like that. But I'm not really, I've said before in previous videos, capable of putting together as much of like a cohesive educational format right now, with where I'm at in my healing journey, and just focusing on my mental, emotional, physical well-being. I'm really just focused on making my life sustainable. I've been going through the disability process, and it is a process. I got my first rejection because, bureaucracy, and they didn't actually look at all of the documentation that I had asked them to look into. They only looked into like a handful of things and then made a decision based on that, which I was very prepared to be rejected the first time. So at least in that way, I was not like completely thrown off by the rejection. But it still was frustrating. And then from there, I obtained pro bono legal representation to help me fight the denial in an effort to gain the approval, because I have very much, as I've aged in my life, I think the effects of my disorder have become more debilitating, in the sense that for so long I was masking and trying to be neurotypical without knowing, to my own detriment. And there are things that have kind of compiled on top of that have only further complicated my ability to function in a quote unquote normal world. I'm really not able to hold a 40-hour a week job. I'm not really capable of being around people because of my sensory issues and my anxiety, which I'm now much more not only aware of, but it's also become more severe because, like I said, I've had other issues going on. I was diagnosed with PTSD and rejection sensitive dysphoria, which isn't an official diagnosis, but it's more of a trait that is found in borderline, in autism, and in ADHD. So I actually had thrifted recently a borderline personality disorder workbook, because even though I wasn't officially diagnosed with borderline personality, I mean, I did ask to be evaluated, but they didn't find that I had borderline personality. The trait of rejection sensitive dysphoria is found in all three disorders, although BPD is a personality disorder, and ADHD and autism are neurodivergent disorders. So they're slightly different, but I figured it was a book that was like $1 and it wasn't used. And I'm like, well, I know they probably tackle RSD stuff, so it can't hurt to go through this workbook and try to work on that stuff. Because for me, a lot of it is not like fear of abandonment or I think necessarily splitting so much. A lot of my reactivity can come from triggered episodes of PTSD from like previous physical sexual trauma, and then thinking that what I'm going through in the moment is subconsciously it's reminding me of things that I've gone through in the past. So I've also been working through therapy and trying to disconnect those wirings in my brain, that kind of, what is it, neuropathway that says, if this happens, then it means this, and to kind of break the cycle of me kind of automatically going into survival mode when something I see reminds me of a former traumatic episode. But for me, RSD more shows up as more just like irrational senses of being disliked, being hated. Some of it is rational because there's definitely been a lot of history of me struggling to connect with people because I am neurodivergent, and I just didn't necessarily have the social skills, the social graces to be able to connect with people in a neurotypical way. So I was seen as strange, and I think that really plays into it. Just this constant like, am I good enough? Do you like me? Am I being normal enough? Did I make you mad? And that's something that I learned about RSD, is that what people without it can typically have like positive, neutral, and negative perspectives. For me, it's more of like there's positive, and then what can be seen as neutral is often labeled as negative. So it really is just two extremes. I'm not really able to see neutral as just neutral. I see it as negative, and I worry. I think, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. Are you mad at me? Your tone changed. Did I say something wrong? And then that causes me a lot of emotional distress that can cause me to spiral emotionally. I've seen it like described in an article, and maybe I've said this before, but what really happens, and I talked about it in the last video where I had been hospitalized from an episode of RSD being triggered, is like it's almost like the volume in my emotional body gets turned up really loud, so it becomes just overwhelming. And in those states, which don't happen often, thankfully, especially now more so, but when they do happen, they're incredibly debilitating, and I kind of lose my sense of perspective and balance and can really spiral. And in the last time, I made a really bad decision, and I'm lucky that I'm okay, but a lot of it was actually precipitated by and I'd said this before, the state of the world, and specifically my country. It was right after the new administration took over, and I was seeing all of these massive changes and what looked like the dismantling of our government. And in the beginning, it really was scary. Not that it's not scary now, but um there was a lot of silence in the first like month, and just seeing things taken apart and thinking, what's happening? Is anybody going to stop this? And kind of after that episode and going to the hospital and restabilizing myself, getting to see other people and like kind of see that the world was still going on as it does. Not to say that it should be normalized, but it did help me kind of feel like it wasn't Armageddon quite yet, which I was very much feeling at the time initially. And that was obviously very much driving my thinking and my emotional state. So I wasn't in a good place. But I was able to get to more of a place of balance. And since then, obviously, not only have I just been more out in the world and seen, people fighting back and life carrying on relatively as normal, although there are still a lot of tragedies that are going on, especially in terms of, wrongful detainment and deportation by ICE, which I'm as the child of an immigrant and naturalized citizen, I'm not at all a fan of. Even if I weren't, I wouldn't be. But I mean, I have a special connection to that. And it's obviously was also making me very heightened of having fears, rational or not, that, they were going to come from my family. Not so much me, but my family, or maybe me, but at this point I've seen a lot of pushback, and I'm really grateful to all the people that are able to get out there and protest. I'm not capable of that. I have to be honest and not shame myself, because as much as I would love to be a part of this moment in history and put my body on the street and the signs out there and yell, it's not conducive to my autism. It's not conducive to my PTSD and my trauma. And so I have very much tried to do other things, which is mostly economic, by disengaging with all of the big corporations. I thrift. I shop from Aldi's. I've gotten my family to switch to Costco from Sam's. So making a lot of economic choices, and then where I'm able to participate in local government and call upon our representatives to, voice my concerns. One of the things I need to do, which Taylor from Mom on the Spectrum suggested, was to start looking into both mine and my daughter's privacy information regarding our health, and contacting our insurance carrier and the doctors we see, and finding out what of any of that is shared, and if I'm able to opt out of having that shared. So it's a bit of a daunting task in and of itself, but that is my next project. So I guess I just wanted to check in and maybe say a little bit about my thoughts about what's going on in my country, in terms of, what's going on with the rhetoric around autism. I mean, and this is just my opinion, but I don't see autism, while I know it is a struggle for most autistic people. I don't know if it's a struggle for all, but I think it's a struggle on to varying degrees in different ways for most autistic people. I don't look at it as something that, as an autistic person, I would want to change about myself. I simply want to just learn to understand myself better, so that I can adapt my lifestyle to better thrive in a neurotypical environment. And the way that I see autism is very much, in my mind, like operating systems. And we live in a Microsoft world where most people, neurotypical autistic people's brains are loaded with Windows operating system. And I like to think that autistic people have a Mac operating system. That's just because I like Macs better, so I pick Mac as our operating system. But what that's really to say is that we all have operating systems. It's just a matter of the interfaces being different, and so that requires adaptation. The way that you use Windows, because I grew up as a Windows user, is different than the way that you use Mac, because I'm now a Mac person in my adult life. Now that I've been able to choose what kind of technology I have, I'm very Mac, pro Mac. So yeah, that's really my thoughts on autism, of just like, I don't think it's a problem, and it's been really disheartening to see. And I'd commented on one of Orion Kelly's community posts, where he shared a woman who was also expressing her sadness for our community, of just how hard it's been to see a lot of online rhetoric about, I would assume, mostly neurotypical autistic parents who have autistic children, that are possibly more on the profound end of the spectrum with higher support needs, and them really being very gung-ho about RFK Jr.'s rhetoric, and being like, this is hard, we want to know how to cure it, we want to fix it. And not only does it make me like sad that those people lack such an understanding of autism, and also I think to try to have compassion for them as well, that they feel so alone, and are probably very under-resourced in their ability to handle whatever family dynamic they have. But especially my concern is for the children of those parents that are voicing concerns in that way, because to me it comes across more like, this is such a miserable burden, please fix this for us, we hate it, how do we get rid of it, and that that scares me as an autistic person who has an autistic child. Like, I just worry for the welfare, especially of autistic children, because especially the ones that are nonverbal, they can't advocate for themselves. So the potential of, abuse and neglect is much higher. So I really would love to see more engagement and research from our government in ways to support autistic people, and support families with autistic people, and providing resources for that, instead of trying to just find a cause, which I think the cause is very complex, to be honest. I did genetic testing, because that was something that was offered to me when my daughter was diagnosed. And so we went ahead and did it, and there was no genetic linkage found, that they know of currently, that would have caused autism. However, I have autism. My dad now knows and believes, without a diagnosis because he's a boomer, that he also has autism. My paternal first cousin's youngest daughter has autism. My maternal half brother, his oldest son has autism. So there is very much in our family, I would say, hereditary or genetic component in us having a higher likelihood of being on the spectrum, but it is not currently understood what causes that genetically. They only know so much genetically, and all of the tests they ran came back negative for us, which was a positive thing in the sense that it ruled out a lot of other comorbid conditions that can be linked with autism, and just create greater health concerns in the future for my daughter. But luckily, fortunately, she doesn't have those. So, that was a positive for us. But I do just wish that they would use their resources more to just try to help people, and not just autistic people, to help Americans, to help, obviously, with the dismantling of USAID, which I think it was, you know, they were told they had to reinstate it, but I don't think they still have. I think we really need to be helping the world more than turning into this sort of isolationist policies, because it really helps no one, and it just alienates people. And we are stronger together when we work together communally and put our minds together for a greater goal, a greater good. And I don't think segregating each other and becoming more divided is the answer, either here locally in my country or abroad. And I think we're seeing, that happening on the world scale, and also especially here. So it's been stressful, but for as much as I can control, and what I can control is what I focus on. So I really don't, I mean, I don't engage in social media other than YouTube. And it's pretty much geared towards a lot of political stuff, and then some little, like, a lot of Korean life vlogs, especially with like mixed couples, because, at one point I was dating a Korean guy, so I guess the algorithm picked up on that. So I finally started re-engaging with that stuff, because it's very grounding for me, because their lives seem so perfect. But I think, like, a couple months ago I stopped watching it because I almost just felt very angry and, like, almost like envious, because it's like their life seems so nice and simple, and then I feel like, our house is on fire, so it was hard for me to watch it and not just be like, but now I've kind of gotten to a more even keel where I'm like, okay, I think I do want to engage in more uh you know content that helps regulate my nervous system, and that helps take my mind away from a lot of the scary things that are happening, not in an effort to hide, but to just take a break from it, and to regulate, and to keep myself as mentally healthy, emotionally, and physically healthy as possible, not only for my benefit, but for my child's benefit. So, yeah, that's really just been my focus. And I wanted to talk more about, like, what I felt were like the villains of autism, but I think I'll get into a video, another video some other time about that topic, because I don't think it's necessarily as top of mind, as relevant as what we're dealing with the current political agenda of our government. And yeah, I'm actually really clean. I just have to say I took a great shower last night and like really loved on myself. But then what I did is I've never been good at hair stuff, and I actually think I have scalp eczema. My daughter has eczema, but I don't normally have, I've never had it really on my body. I've usually just gotten it here, and then I've noticed I've really been getting it on my scalp. And so I tried to put leave-in conditioner in my hair, and I think I went overboard. So even though my hair is freshly washed in less than like, 12 hours, 18 hours ago, I like put too much conditioner, and so it just looks like a grease mess, which I'm frustrated about. And yeah, I think you could even see a flake there. At first I thought it was dandruff, but it's really not. It's like it's eczema, it's irritation, inflammation. So I'm gonna have to research a good shampoo and not buy from any of the big box retailers, and spend my money wisely to try to treat it, because it's been going on for a long time, and I want to get rid of it. So yeah, I should have put this on Do Not Disturb. My dad just called, so I'm gonna end it here so I can call him back. And yeah, that's my video. So thank you so much for watching. If you stayed till the end, please, I would encourage you to like and subscribe and even comment, because it does help. I think I feel silly saying this, but some of what has made me a little bit reluctant to even get on YouTube is that like posting things and then not feeling like things are well received, even though I know it's a process, also triggers my RSD. And I'm not saying that in any way to like guilt people. I'm just trying to be very transparent about like kind of the push and pull of social media, in the sense of like using YouTube for me. So it's like I don't necessarily want to be a huge account or anything, because I don't think I could handle a lot of attention. I do want to have some engagement and feel like I'm not just speaking to the void. So please feel free to subscribe, to like, comment, share if you resonate. And yeah, until next time, I hope everyone is well. I am well, and I hope that the world will get better. There's a loud car outside. I'm gonna call my dad back. Bye.